Great. Well, everybody, welcome. Welcome. We're really excited that you're here on a Wednesday evening virtually. And this is a great big panel with a great group of panelists and a lot of organizations that have come together to put this on. So we're really excited that you're joining us. We're also streaming on YouTube and Facebook via Tucson Meet Yourself accounts. If you have friends that want to join, feel free to send them a text. All right, so my name is Willa Allsweet. I work at the University of Arizona and the University of Arizona Museum of Art. And the University of Arizona sits on the homelands of indigenous peoples who have stewarded this land since time immemorial, including the Tohono people, Pasquayaki, and Apache tribal people. So it's our institutional responsibility to recognize and acknowledge the people, culture, and history that make up the Wildcat community, and always be proactive in broadening awareness throughout our campus and beyond to ensure our students feel represented and valued. I'd like to thank our partners in organizing this event, the UA Center for Regional Food Studies, the Southwest Folk Life Alliance as part of Tucson Meet Yourself. And I encourage you all to explore more Tucson Meet Yourself events this year, all throughout October, happening virtually, and a few outdoor events as well, as we've all pivoted, as well as more upcoming UAMA events and virtual exhibitions and virtual events through the Center for Regional Food Studies. We'll be posting some links in the chat for more upcoming events on this topic and others. Megan Carney, Megan Carney, the director of the Center for Regional Food Studies, is going to be our moderator here today, facilitating a conversation between 5 panelists who have a lot of different perspectives about our local food system. And we're only just beginning to understand the impacts of COVID-19 on our food systems. So we're going to sort of get into our preliminary findings and reactions from those of you who are working in food right now. So representing those perspectives from campus to the Tucson larger community, we have Bridget Nobby, coordinator of the UA Campus Pantry and other basic needs initiatives for students, faculty, and staff at UA. We have Max Lee, who's a member of Flowers and Bullets, a collective of artists, farmers, and community organizers who created the Barrio Centro Midtown Farm. We have Doug Levy, the chef and owner of Feast Restaurant. Gina Owens, a research scientist at CLIMAS, or the Climate Assessment for the Southwest. And Laurel Ballante, who is also the assistant director of the Center for Regional Food Studies and the director of the Food Studies degree here at UA. So all kinds of expertise to share with you today. We'll begin with a chance for panelists to introduce themselves and their work and show you some slides and images of some of that work, followed by a guided conversation led by Megan, and time for questions from all of you. So we've scheduled the event for about an hour and a half to allow time for everyone to be able to share. It will be recorded and posted later on YouTube, and feel free to post your questions at any time using the Q&A button that should be at the bottom of your screen. Let us know your questions anytime during the talk, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. All right, I'm gonna pass it off. Megan, do you want to say anything, or shall we go with our first panelist?
Yeah, actually, let's give everyone an opportunity to give a broader introduction about the work that they've been doing. And some of you have presented or prepared presentations, so we've allocated time to that.
Okay, here we go. Bridget, I believe, is up first. There we go. And Bridget, just let me know if you need me to advance a slide.
Absolutely. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for attending virtually. My name is Bridget Nobby, and as Willa mentioned, I'm the coordinator of the University of Arizona Campus Pantry and Campus Closet, kind of working with our basic needs initiatives. For this presentation, I'm just going to be focusing on the Campus Pantry, but if you have any other questions on any of our programs, feel free to reach out to us anytime. So Will, if you want to advance it, that'd be great. If you're not familiar with what the University of Arizona Campus Pantry is, we provide supplemental groceries to students, faculty, and staff at the University of Arizona who are experiencing food insecurity. So nationwide, it's estimated that 1 in 3 college students are food insecure. And at the University of Arizona, it's estimated that about 28% of students experience food insecurity at some point in their academic career. So this always looks different for every student, and access looks different for every student. So I think when we usually think about what is food insecurity, we think of money. And money absolutely is a huge thing that affects college students. I'll never deny that one. But there's also a lot of other aspects. So having cooking equipment and ability to get access to kitchens and have pots and pans, that's a huge aspect of food insecurity. Transportation to get groceries. That's something that as we further this discussion about COVID-19 and the impacts, that's a big one that I'll mention as well. And then there's some of having culturally nourishing foods or unfamiliar foods. We have a lot of international students at the U of A and a large international student population coming to the campus pantry. So we do see a lot of different students who are coming to get items that they might not be familiar with, or the items in their grocery stores are not items that they're used to cooking. So I have our hours listed here. We're open 3 times a week. Anybody that has a CAT card is welcome to come. So as I mentioned, we are open to faculty and staff. We do mainly focus on students, but we do have staff that are coming to the pantry, especially in a time of furloughs. We've had a lot of staff who have hours cut back over the summer or have needed additional assistance. Students and faculty and staff, they can come 1 time that we're open per day. So if they're interested, they can come 3 times per week. And there are serious impacts of college food insecurity on their health and academic performance. And so we say that food insecurity in general impacts even our K through 12 students, their growth, their education, their ability to focus. Well, that all continues when they come to college. And so food insecurity just doesn't end when they turn 18 or they leave their parents' houses. That continues. It also has really important things on academic performance. And it's kind of unfortunately a cycle. So if you're more likely to be food insecure, you're more likely to be sick often. If you're not having nourishing foods, which is more likely you're going to miss class. If you miss class, you're more likely to have lower grades. You're more likely to have a lower academic GPA, which then could affect your retention. So unfortunately, it just is a cycle that keeps going. We did start in 2012 by a graduate student who lived in one of the community residence halls here at the University of Arizona, and she was seeing that her students were experiencing food insecurity. And so that's why her and her peers decided to work together to create a program to provide items to those students. I've been here now for 3 years, since 2017, and we've had substantial growth in that time. So Will, if you want to advance the slide, I can talk a little bit about our growth and our users. So this is our data from the entire year of last year. So from fall of 2019 to May of 2020, we on average saw about 1,050 visits per week by 700 unique users. I'm not going to go too much into COVID, but I will mention that our numbers did drastically change when COVID happened. We went from 1,050 visits per week to about 450. And that was just because a lot of folks returned home. And the students that were left on campus were our international students and our graduate students, who for the most part do not return home over breaks because Tucson is their home as they're getting their degree here. We do serve a large number of graduate students compared to undergraduate students, but 1 in 3 of our students are international students. And then these next 3 categories are just broken down into undergraduate only. So 55% of our undergraduate users do receive the Pell Grant. So I'm asked all the time, how do you know that your students are food insecure? One, it's kind of up to them to self-disclose. We don't do any type of researching into if they are food insecure or not. We want them to be able to come if they feel like they're in need of us. And we want to empower them to take advantage of the resources that are available to them to support them to get their degrees. So this is a number, though, that we can highlight to say that there is a large number of students who are in need. 37% of our undergraduate users do live on campus in a residence hall. That brings in a lot of the conversations about transportation and the cooking equipment and where do you prepare your food, or what type of food are you able to prepare in your dorm room or in a kitchen in your residence halls. Also, 46% of our undergraduate students are first generation. So I'm going to go more into what the different things that we've been seeing during COVID, but I wanted to give you all a brief introduction into the Campus Pantry. We're a student-run team, and I think it's important to mention that college food insecurity just exists nationwide. And not only are we here on campus with college food insecurity, but PIMA also has a food bank there and has a lot of students that are food insecure there. So it's a really important aspect to think about the college students when addressing food insecurity, because it's a group that we often don't think of. We usually think of adults or K through 12 students, but food, like college food insecurity is a niche group. And so I'm really glad that you all had me here to have this discussion. Okay, you can go to the next person, Willa.
Looks like it's me. Hello, everyone. It's Max Lee. I'm here to represent the Flowers and Bullets Collective. Willa, can you go to the next slide? So the name Flowers and Bullets, we are a local collective based in Barrio Central neighborhood. Flowers stand for the transformative future we're building through gardening, arts, and other community healing process, where the bullets stand for the struggle that we have to go through. Most of our members have had a generational trauma as a result of systemic racism and mass incarceration. But we're fighting and using a different weapon that's plants and animals and beauties and murals. Can you go to the next slide? Just some background of our barrio. So what you see in this yellow line, that's the Barrio Central Julia King neighborhood. It's just south of 22nd, south of Reed Park. But as soon as you cross 22nd Street, things get really different from the north. This is more than 70% Latinx population, and a lot of them are indigenous descendants of indigenous people who still consider ourselves indigenous people on this land. And you can see the composition of our neighborhood. North is a nice area, that's Reed Park, but south we are bounded with Aviation Highway and the Pacific Union Rail Yard. And then to our southeast is the Davis Mountain Air Force Base. Could you go to the next picture? Okay, so what's near the Davis Mountain flight path, this entire neighborhood is actually on the landing path. So I apologize if there's an airplane just fly over and making noise. But 2004, the Davis Mountain Air Force Base changed their flight path directly to the top of Julia King Elementary School without consulting with the neighborhood. So as a result, the school had closed. And then the school is not just the only public school in this neighborhood. It's also the community center. People vote here, people have festival here, people have other classes. So as Tito said, he was one of the co-founders, if you took a school out of the neighborhood, you took the heart of our neighborhood. So since the school's closure, there were a lot of problems start to rise. And in 2016, the Tucson Unified School District, TUSD, plans to sell it to the Penske Trucking Company. You can actually see these trucks just south of the school. So Flowers and Bullets was founded in 2012 in response to actually the closure of the ethnic study program of TUSD. And we want to, gain our sovereignty of our culture, of our land. So in 2016, when the news comes, the school will be sold to Penske, Flowers and Bullets organized neighbors showed up, and eventually when this negotiation, so the school district is willing to let Flowers and Bullets to have the sole right to lease the land and then transform this land to a community safe space. So these are some of the murals we put in Barrio Central, Donde Vive El Corazon, and the heart is in the neighborhood. And there's the first mural we put at the school Ramada after we were able to use the land and to welcome everybody. Can we go to the next slide? So starting in 2018, I think we were fortunate to receive two grants, large grants, one from the Vitalist Health Foundation and the other from the Harvey Program of Environmental Social Justice. So we worked with the community school garden program here at the U of A to start to transform this place to a healing space. That's another mural here. We sent our name and we called it the Midtown Farm, which sits in the middle of the city. And we grow food organically, regeneratively. And we also plant native trees. That was trees planted 2 years ago. Now they are fully grown. So these are native Palo Verde, Palo Brea, ironwood, mesquites. So these are actually the most important food for the indigenous people. And they don't use, they can be solely thrive on rain. And we also have chickens and goats that provide us protein, but also as a really kids like to come to the place because of the presence of animals. Next slide. And we're not only working within at farm and in the neighborhood, but also reach out. So, there's the farm crew that operates on the farm mainly, but there's also the rainwater harvesting crew that helps install systems, water harvesting systems in the neighborhoods in collaboration, with support from the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona and the City of Tucson rainwater harvesting rebate program. The picture on the left, that's the Babakivari in Ogden, the Babakivari High School. So we collaborate with the school students and install the rainwater harvesting systems at high school at cell. So these are the work we continue to do. And even in the midst of the COVID-19, I can say more about, later about the impact of COVID-19 and how we respond in the long run by doing the same thing we've been doing. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Doug Levy, and I'm the chef and owner of Feast Restaurant. Feast has been around for 19 and a half years. And boy, you can sort of tell I'm not used to doing the whole academia thing. Everyone's got these PowerPoint presentations, and I did send a couple of photos, but there are some now. Yeah. When they asked me to join this panel, it was from a perspective of how we have adapted during the pandemic. And there are a couple of points I wanted to touch on for us. First of all, we are 19 years old, and so I feel really fortunate that we have had this time to build relationships with the community and therefore be able to keep our doors open. When I think of John Martinez down the street in our former space at Tito and Pep and realize that they're 2 years old, I can't imagine if this had happened to us when we were 2 years old, how we'd have handled it. It's been pretty devastating for the restaurant industry, and then for all of the surrounding industries. If I've watched dozens of wine reps be furloughed or just outright laid off. I've watched the guy who delivers my linen be furloughed indefinitely. It's an industry that employs 11 million people, and that's just the 11 million people who are working in restaurants in the US. When you add all these peripheral things, my produce companies, of which I have two, broadliners like US Foods and Cisco, they're all laying people off left and right. And we, as a small independent restaurant that employs fewer than 50 people, are really fortunate to be able to keep our doors open, primarily through having built relationships in the community. We've got an email list of about 4,600 people, and our guests have been longtime regular guests. We have someone who has joined us virtually every day since we were in our old space where Tito and Pep is now. So she's been coming here daily for 13, 14 years. And so we're fortunate to have that kind of support. We also have a lot of guests who are from vulnerable populations and aren't able to come join us. We have not yet opened for dine-in. We're doing strictly takeout, but one of the ways that we have been keeping open, as you can see from these little photos, is every other week I send an email out to our 4,600 people and say, will you help us donate food? This started very early on in the pandemic. Two dear friends, one of whom who actually used to work at Feast is now a PA at Tucson Medical Center. And he was working in one of the first wards that was flipped to become a COVID ward when it all started. And we wanted to recognize him and his team, and we wanted to kind of send a hopeful message and send some recognition to them. And so I sent food to about 300 people that week at TMC, both in their emergency department and a couple of COVID wards and a cardiac ward as well. And we had so many people donate that we had money left over. So we decided, let's keep doing this. We went to Banner, we went to St. Mary's, St. Joe's, we went to 4 different El Rio clinics, and people kept supporting us, and people kept telling their friends who aren't on our email list and maybe had other interests. We've supported 7 different animal shelters, a couple of different fire departments during the wildfires up to the north. We have sent food to the Primavera Men's Shelter, to the Sister Jose Women's Center. This coming week, we're sending food to the Pima County Elections Department and the Pima County Recorder's Office, and all the people who are helping to ensure that voting goes as smoothly as possible during this time. And it's been really great and exciting to see the level of support we've been getting from the community, and be able to keep our doors open and keep our staff employed by helping others. So I'm really grateful for it. I'm really excited about it. I will say that restaurants, whether they're open for dine-in now or not, are having a really difficult time. We're hoping for some big legislative changes, and I would encourage people to go. I think I sent a link to the website, saverestaurants.org, which is the Independent Restaurant Coalition. It's estimated that without help from the federal government, that 85% of independent restaurants will close permanently by the end of the year. And yeah, I'd prefer not to be among them. Oh, look, somebody's putting it up. Thank you so much. And thank you, Natasha, for posting our web address. Yeah, I think it's actually saverestaurants.org as opposed to saverestaurants.com. Yeah, it's just a great way to contact your congressperson or your senator and say, hey, this is important to me. I would like to see restaurants remain in existence besides, fast food chains, because right now I think that's the only thing that's doing well. that's what I've got. So I cede the floor to the next wonderful, amazing person.
Great. Well, that is me and Laurel. And we are here to talk about a research project that we recently began about building out regional food system resilience in Southern Arizona and learning from the moment of COVID-19. Can you advance to the next slide, please? Thanks. And so our research team, besides me, I'm Gina Owens, and I work with the Climate Assessment for the Southwest, which is a federally funded program through the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, but is housed here at the University of Arizona. And my colleague, Dr. Laurel Ballante, is in the Center for Regional Food Studies. And we have some great graduate assistants, Eden Kincaid from the School of Geography and Development, and Sean McCabe from the College of Architecture, Planning, and Landscape Architecture. And so our project really is looking at the impacts of COVID-19 on the Southern Arizona food system, and really looking at Pima County with the goal of understanding kind of the physical and the social and economic impacts of the pandemic on food and agriculture in our region, and to support development of a local food system that is resilient to kind of future shocks and future social, economic, and environmental stressors and other kinds of disruptions. The pandemic kind of serves as this really important moment to understand these various individual and institutional and local and state and federal government responses to this global scale crisis, and how that looks, what that looks like on a local level, and to understand what's working and what's not working. And kind of some of our early discussions about this project before it really began was about seeing all this the different kinds of community need, and also the various different community responses. And we were thinking about what our role as researchers and as social scientists could play in supporting these community responses. So we kind of see our role in all of this right now to help look at trends and changes over time, and turn some of our observations and data into actions and policy that will help kind of build a robust local food system that is resilient to future environmental and public health crises. So this includes a survey with agricultural producers who distribute or sell goods in Pima County. And then we're conducting interviews, and this is all ongoing, current. So we're conducting interviews with producers and distributors and restaurants, and also organizations who work in the realm of local food policy and food access. So the rest of the intro, I'm just gonna kind of briefly provide an overarching picture of the impact that COVID's had on food nationally and locally, and then Laurel's gonna share some of the emerging trends that we're starting to see from our survey and interviews. Next slide, please. So the COVID-19 pandemic really brought several already existing disparities and inequalities in the food system to the surface. I think we all saw an initial break in supply chains. I know, for those of us who went grocery shopping back in March, I know I was shocked to see these pictures of empty shelves coming in from all over the country from friends, and then going to my grocery store and seeing empty shelves. And, I think seeing this breakdown in supply chains unearthed several deeply ingrained inequities in our food system. And even over time, as the stores in the Tucson area became stocked, people who live in more remote areas did not really regain access as quickly, or didn't have access to the types of foods that they wanted or needed. And then over the past several months, as people lost their jobs and have begun to lose their jobs, or were furloughed, had less income, we've seen a real rise in food insecurity levels around the city. And some of the other vulnerabilities that were exposed included, this lack of government support for small businesses and local restaurants and small to medium-sized farms, and increased levels of risk for essential workers in the food system without, adequate safety measures or adequate safety equipment, or workers who often have inadequate access to healthcare, and were not receiving any increase in pay for putting themselves out there and risking their own health. And you see that in the restaurant world, in food retail, and farm workers, and processing plants, and delivery and transportation, just in every level across. Next slide, please. So meanwhile, while we're having, consumers are kind of scrambled to get food or get enough food, the abrupt closure of institutions who purchase large quantities of food, like schools and workplace cafeterias and restaurants, led to abruptly canceled contracts with food producers, and that initially resulted in excess product. Crops are going to continue to grow, and cows and goats are going to continue to produce milk, and chickens are going to continue to lay eggs. And where does all that go if it's this real sudden, closure or stop? So unfortunately, a lot of it got dumped. I think back in March and April, Arizona dairy farmers were dumping more than 100,000 gallons of milk a day because of slowed down restaurant service and shut down school cafeterias and canceled catered events. And so on one side, we were seeing this huge increase in need, and then this other side, there was huge excess product. And also then kind of some issues around inadequate access to the right cooling and storage systems for future use, or ways to transport these items in a timely manner to other markets or to consumers or to food banks and food pantries. Next slide, please. And so with several of these national supply chains breaking, we saw that people all over the country were turning to their local food system. And that also happened here in Tucson. Community supported agriculture shares and meat shares quickly filled up and sold out. People were turning to their local farmers and ranchers and to farmers markets, also buying all the product they could from those local growers. And then farmers markets had to adapt how they would operate with new safety protocol. We saw some really innovative examples with drive-through markets and senior hours. There was increased development and participation in mutual aid networks and organizations like Tucson Food Share with free grocery distribution. And we saw increased reliance on local food banks and food pantries. There was also a renewed interest in backyard gardening, a real run on seeds there at the beginning, but then also efforts towards seed sharing and conservation of seeds to share. We saw some relatively rapid shifts in local policy, like removing the daily limit on Double Up Bucks, which is a program that matches SNAP benefits dollar for dollar for fresh grown Arizona fruits and vegetables and dried beans. So there were lots of examples that are kind of popping up in our research of responses in the local food system. And one reason that we hypothesize for this is that local producers and distributors and institutions are really able to adjust more quickly to the local needs and issues that they're seeing and experiencing on the ground. They have those relationships with people and know what's needed. The other thing is that it's putting a lot of pressure on this infrastructure of the local food system that is really driven by individuals and doesn't have a lot of large-scale government support to deal with this sudden increase in need and demand. Anyway, and so now I'm going to turn over to Laurel, who will discuss some of our emerging findings.
Great. Hi, everyone. Can you advance to the next slide, please? Great. So thank you, Gigi, for that. So I'm Laurel Ballante. I've been involved with different research in the Southern Arizona food system for the last 10 years or so, and it's been a real pleasure and also just a distressing time to be researching food in our region right now. On the one hand, I say it's been a real pleasure because this research, even though it's just been started, has allowed me to connect with a lot of people that are movers and shakers here in our community, in our region, and I do see a lot of reason for hope. And at the same time, there's no denying that we're in a continuing moment of crisis. I mean, as Doug mentioned, you know, the restaurant industry in particular has been extremely hard hit by the crisis. Just here in Pima County, about 34,000 people work in the food service industry. So about 14% of jobs in Pima County are linked to the restaurant economy here. There's been a lot of evidence of increasing hunger and food insecurity. A lot of the trends that Gigi mentioned that are happening nationally are also happening here locally. So a few weeks ago, I spoke with Robert Ojeda from the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona, and they're seeing about 1,300 cars, excuse me, per day lining up for food boxes. And so on the one hand, there's just no denying that we're in an ongoing moment of crisis. It's not over. There's very much a sense that there's continue to be more crisis that's looming in terms of unemployment and food insecurity and job loss and potential business closures. But there's also a lot of reason for hope. And I think it's a very critical for us to always remember that in times of crisis, it's also times of opportunity. And so how do we think about this particular crisis as an opportunity for us to envision the kind of food system that we want, and to the extent that we're able to invest our energy and our resources and our votes into building that food system. So real quickly, and I can go into any of this in more depth as we get into the Q&A, but some of the just emerging findings that we're having with this very, very recent research, so we're just about 5 or 6 weeks into this, is that a key factor in resilience during crisis, any kinds of crisis, is already having established networks of relationships. And this is true for the kind of solidarity and mutual aid networks that we're seeing, but it's also true in the extent that, much like Doug mentioned, that the extent to which people are already connected before moments of crisis allows us to have a lot more flexibility to respond to that crisis in creative ways. Communication channels also are really important, and we've been seeing a lot of innovation in how actors in our food system are responding and using different social media platforms and communication networks to get out their message of how they're adjusting. And this, again, similar to the point number 2 here, the networks, all of these channels had to be established beforehand. So as an example, Pivot Produce, which is run by Eric Stanford, a business that originally distributed food from local farms to about, I think, 30 different restaurants here locally. Overnight, he lost about 90% of the demand from restaurants. But with one Instagram post, he was able to get 350 people to sign up for a new home food box delivery system. So basically, having those kind of platforms of communication have been absolutely critical for people to communicate changes in their business model and to create new models for keeping our food system afloat. Point number 4 is particularly important from my perspective, is that right now we're seeing that there's just a huge value in our local food system. And it's not just about food, right? Yes, there's all sorts of examples we can point to where different people throughout our local food system have been doing incredible works in terms of distributing food to people in need. But it's also about the human connections, right? It's about community solidarity and the ability to help each other out in moments of crisis. And there's so much evidence happening right now showing how isolated we are and how much we're struggling with all sorts of mental challenges, psychological, social, and our local food system is actually filled with examples and opportunities where people are able to be outside, to connect. You know, if you go to the farmers markets these days, there's so much action, and it's really quite joyful to see that there's still spaces where people can connect and kind of overcome some of that sense of isolation. You know, garden spaces are also, I think, something really important to emphasize during this time, the importance of public outdoor spaces and as places for physical health, for social gathering, and all of these things, even if we have to be protective of our own health. I was speaking with Moses Thompson from the Community and School Garden Program the other day, and he was talking about the importance of gardens right now for children who are, you know, there was already a lot of need prior to the COVID crisis for children to have access to outdoor spaces and to be in the dirt. And now that's at an all-time high, right? This need to counteract a lot of the psychological hardship that is going along with the economic hardships that we're facing can be counteracted by having access to garden spaces and time to be outdoors. I could go on and on, but in the interest of brevity, I will continue. The other trends that we're seeing is this increase in delivery services, online shopping, and curbside pickup of local food. And this, I think, is safe to say we'll continue to see moving forward. This is something that Doug mentioned fast food. It's been a very fast food's killing it, but also the businesses that are able to pivot in a way that can deliver food to people in a safe way through delivery or curbside pickup has been really important. And geography matters. As we're moving into the winter months, there's a lot to say how in Southern Arizona, a lot of the benefits, we just enjoy a lot of benefits from having a climate that allows us to be outdoors year round and to operate different aspects of our food system in outdoors. So whether that's gardening year round or having public markets outside, that's a huge benefit to us right now as we can't gather in inside spaces. Different policies have been key to navigating this crisis. As just a few examples, some city policies have been critical, such as the city allowing for alcohol to go sales. I know that has been key for a lot of restaurants to be able to stay afloat during this time, to have some additional income from alcohol sales. There's also been efforts to cap delivery fees so that restaurants aren't being gouged so intensely on the pricing for delivery and able to get their food out. Gigi mentioned the Double Up Food Bucks program that's allowed SNAP recipients to get matching funds to use their SNAP bucks for Arizona grown fruits and vegetables. And there's also been these federal support for free meals for children. So currently TUSD is distributing free grab and go meals for children under 18 at all 67 stops on the bus route. So there's been a lot of policies that have also been really critical to our ability to respond in this moment. And lastly, the final point on this slide is the creativity and flexibility. And there's so many examples of this already that we've seen just in the interviews that we've done so far, is that the actors in our local food system have really been amazing at responding to this current moment, to shifting their business models so that they have, some business owners created online grocery markets. The Pivot Produce shifted from being a farm to restaurant delivery distributor to being a farm to home distributor. Food Not Bombs started a Tucson food share, home delivery of emergency food aid and things like that. So a lot of examples to look to in that as well. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, I think it's really important to think about this time of crisis as also a time of opportunity and a time to demand the food system that we want. A part of that, my role within that is a researcher role, and as with Gigi, is to gather the information from our actors in our local food system to understand what's working and what can be done to improve things. So if you are at all involved in our food system as a producer, distributor, restaurant owner, etc., we would love to be in touch with you. So our contact information is here, and I think we can also put some links in the chat as we move forward. So I'll stop there and look forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Wow, thank you everyone for your really informative and thorough presentations. Laurel and Gigi, it sounds like this study is already yielding some really interesting findings. And yeah, those of you who are attending tonight and find yourself to meet the eligibility criteria for this study, please, we encourage you to get in touch with Gigi and Laurel. And just as a reminder, there is a Q&A function and we welcome your questions. We will reserve about 20 minutes at this point for Q&A at the end of the event. So I just wanted to follow up with a couple of questions. This panel here had agreed upon some points that we wanted to address and discuss together. So some of you had an opportunity to elaborate on the ways that you and your work have been impacted by the pandemic and how you've pivoted during this time, but we didn't hear as much on that from Max and Flowers and Bullets, as well as from Bridget with the UA campus food pantry. So I want to invite both of you right now to illuminate for us how the pandemic has affected your work and how you've had to respond during this critical time. And I don't know if one of you would prefer to go first.
Would you like to go first?
Okay, I can go first. So at the campus pantry, I kind of already mentioned that the biggest thing was just the numbers of folks that were coming to the pantry was a big decrease. But I think it's important to mention that although it was a decrease, we had a lot of new individuals coming for the first time. So some of the students who were here previously, they might have been living in the residence halls, the undergraduate students who are low income, but had relationships with family members and they were able to go back with their families. We weren't serving them anymore. They went back to Phoenix or California or wherever they're from, or even in Tucson, we had folks go back to where they grew up. But that's not the case with all students. And that's pretty privileged to think that college students could just go home. We do serve a large number of foster students here at the U of A and at the campus pantry. We work very closely with a program called Fostering Success. And they have about 80 students who are emancipated minors. They aged out of foster care or were homeless individuals. Those students don't have a place to go back to. And if they are going back to another environment, that could have serious impacts on like financially for them. It could have impacts mental health wise. They might not be going back to a positive environment. And cost wise too, to try to leave campus or go somewhere else. And so those folks, like once they come to campus, campus is their home. And so that's a huge one that I want to emphasize, but also those staff that were furloughed. I know somebody put something in the chat that they've been coming to the pantry, and it's really good to hear from people to know how much of an impact that we do make. We don't ask a lot of questions from folks when they come. But at the end of the day, folks who had their hours cut in half, one of the first things to go is sometimes food. But if you're able to get food from somewhere like Campus Pantry, that might be able to provide for not only yourself, but also for your family. Another thing I want to mention is like going with Laurel and Gigi's research on kind of some of the products and the food shortages. That's something that we experienced. And we actually had folks telling us like, you have the most food out of any of the stores I've seen, or you have the most food out of this. it was kind of true, but we did see things. One of the items that's taken the most from us is bags of rice. We could not find bags of rice anywhere in town. It was just, they just didn't exist anymore. And so we were able to get support from like the student union, who had extra like 50-pound bags of rice. They were really helpful in helping us repackage them and trying to eliminate this food waste. But also dairy products, that was huge. We had folks come in like, you're the only place that I've seen eggs, or you're the only place that I've seen milk. But when you look at our students, we talk about transportation, such a problem anyways. Those students then don't have the means to go to 4 grocery stores like you or I might have when there are shortages. Like if I need eggs, I'm like, okay, I'll go to Bash's this day and I'll go to Fry's this next day just so I can find the items I need, or check back, or be able to go super early in the morning or super late in the evening and try to find a time after they restocked. That's not a possibility for these individuals. And lastly, a lot of these individuals, lost jobs for students as well. When we went remote, most student jobs on campus ended. Everybody who worked in food service, those jobs ended. Internships, that was a huge one we saw. And honestly, we got a lot of volunteers from it, from folks that were like, my internship's been canceled, or I can't do this anymore, or they're not doing virtual internships. It was beneficial for us in that we got some great volunteers from it. But that's money that folks were planning on having to be able to pay for their next school year. That did not happen. And a lot of folks were impacted by restaurants. We had that from public pools. We've heard that from students who were planning on working at summer camps. A lot of jobs were just cut. And so those students are bringing those financial burdens that they've like accumulated since March with them into this school year. So I believe we're at like 8,000, I think, folks technically living on campus or being in person on campus now, because we're not yet into that phase 3. But still, we're seeing 700 visits a week, and normally we saw 1,000. So if we're having like 25 maybe % of the students on campus, but we're only serving 300 less students a week, that's pretty substantial. And my last point is the students who are coming, the folks who are coming, are taking advantage of being able to come multiple times a week and not just once. So that is showing that it might not be as many folks, but those folks who are in need have a greater need and need to come more often. So I'll let Max take it away with his changes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Yeah, I'm here speaking for Flowers and Bullets. I'm maybe the least typical member of Flowers and Bullets. I'm a transplant from China. I actually have a PhD in ecology. I'm paid by the university and the Arizona Center Desert Museum to have a full-time job. But most folks don't have the privilege I have. We are in the mostly brown community, so it started with low-income jobs, food insecure, and then have health problems. So when the COVID hit, the impact is very, very visceral. We have just within our core, within our collective and the immediate families, we have people passed away because of COVID. We have mental health issues, domestic violence, all these things. People lost jobs and had to go to the food bank, but not be able to find the food they should be eating. People still had to go back to jail despite COVID. So, it's a lot when there's a sudden disruption. But I really just want to underscore the resilience. Came out with all this, and one of the members just felt like, oh, it used to feel like a lot of stress, and now it's just normal stress, even though the thing you're handling is by no means normal. We still create a pod, supporting pod when things happen, and we try to meet on Zoom. And if it's not possible, then you go test it and meet in person. And a farm is such a space that we can still have a reasonable people, by reasonable with limited number of people at the farm to 7. So we can have some small group meetings at the farm, wear masks with safe distance. When COVID first hit, there were very little resources, and we worked with the Thunder Canyon Brewery to start produce COVID kit that has hand sanitizers and homemade masks, and other groups will just come and make their mask and donate. So as Laurel pointed out that community cohesion or the relationship building in the past years and years all become important at this point. Yeah, and think we're just gonna continue, and now we know a bit more about the virus, so we feel more secure to allow a bit more people to come to work at the farm, with all the safety protocols. But we're still, with limited resource, we can just like do very regular check, with thermal guns and stuff. So that's, that still creates problems. And also there's a lot of things that we planned for 2020, fundraising to raise enough funds to actually buy the land, so to secure this land. We can't do that anymore with COVID. So a lot of things are which we think are very critical, important for the future, has to be paused. But we keep going, and I think this is the first year we start to practice no-till method at a farm, both doing composting, tilling, mild tilling versus no-till, to see the effect on building a healthier soil. With Eric Peter Produce, we actually sold a lot of the foods to Peter Produce, which then got redistributed to people in need. But also a lot of foods we will just give for free. There's a lack of infrastructure since we still don't own the land and we don't have access to any electricity on the farm. So we're building a cold storage but without electricity at the moment. So a lot of food we harvested this season, they go bad very quick without, if we can't distribute it fast. So a lot of them, we just have to come up and post it on Facebook, hey, there's free food, collect, and if no one can collect it within a day, let's give it to Casa Maria. So all these response that we have to make with the limited resources we have. But also from the long term, COVID is just this one small thing. It's major, it sounds major, but in a community that has been experienced generations of suppression, it was long term versus just a very abrupt short term pause of problem. Food insecurity is going to continue even after COVID goes away. Climate change is going to continue even when COVID goes away. So we still have to keep our plan to do the long term. That's what I'm saying. We're building the soil. We're making a plan for the farm for the next 10 to 15 years, how you harvest all the rain at the farm, so we not completely rely on the tap water, and how we start to design community space for meditation. All these are in our plan to continue to move on.
Max, thank you so much. And your comments actually provide a really nice segue to the next topic and question. So actually, this is a two-part question. How do you all see other crises we're facing, such as climate change, structural racism, police violence, we could go on, surfacing or intersecting with the work that you're doing right now? And the second part of the question, where do you find relief in your work, or is relief possible in your work? Raise your hand if you're ready to address that two-part question. I'll call on you. Max, I know you in particular had alluded to the healing or mental health aspects of the farming collective. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that at all.
Yeah, we are, really approaching it from a holistic point of view. Me being academic trained and having key interest in permaculture, try to think of it from a permaculture framework. But permaculture just really bring a lot of the concepts from indigenous thinking. So the folks at FMB and all the co-founders, they're doing it without calling it permaculture. So you really have to look at this big picture, and then doing a relationship-based approach. So everything, by relationship is not just the relationship among humans, but the relationship with the land, with the animals and the plants and the microbes. in this entire environment, how you keep improving that relationship to make the whole system more resilient. So that's the overall healing that we're talking about. So it's not just about producing food. The way you produce food has to benefit both human and nature. So in that way, the system can continue improve by harnessing the power of nature, which human is a part of it. So the community spiritual building that we should be more and more connected is a key part of it. But also we need to be more connected with the plants, the animals. By that we need to build a habitat. We need to restore the things that we destroy. And with that, then the food actually now exists in this space. You don't have to pay expensive money to get food or go out to get food, but the food is become in a time of crisis. Food exists, available in this space.
Yeah, Laurel and Gigi. Yeah, I saw your hands there.
I don't know if we had similar points, but just kind of going off of some of the stuff that Max was saying. I mean, I think a lot about climate change and climate adaptation in my own research. And, agriculture is really interesting because on one hand, it's kind of a cause and driver of the greenhouse gas emission. Like the current large scale production ag is kind of a contributor to climate change, but agriculture could also be a solution to draw down carbon emissions from the atmosphere, and using some of these techniques that Max was talking about in terms of indigenous practices and no-till ag and regenerative restorative practices. And so I think I think that they're just inextricably linked. And, some things that the farmers have really been talking about in terms of yes, COVID has had a huge impact, but these are some other things that are having, that I'm more concerned about. And a lot of that is drought and access to water, and increased heat and changing daily temperatures and minimum temperatures, and just how that's fluctuating. And I mean, just this year this was the worst monsoon in record for Tucson and record-setting heat. I think it was maybe the second hottest summer on record. And if that is the trend that continues, all these things are going to play a bigger role, and it's really the convergence of what would that look like next year versus this year versus 5 years from now, and how do you plan for that? And I think that those are big questions that are really being talked about amongst local farmers and policy makers and distributors and restaurants.
Thank you. Laurel, did you want to add anything to that? And then Doug, I saw your hand too.
Sure. Since Gigi touched on kind of the climate change aspect of the crisis, I would just add, something that has impressed me so far with the interviews that I've conducted with different restaurant owners and food distributors that are working with local food producers here in Tucson, is that every single person has mentioned concerns about social justice. And this is something that, we're seeing it in the national media, that there's this renewed kind of spotlight on our food system right now. There, all of those meat processing plants getting shut down because of COVID outbreaks and things has really, I think, drawn to the fore all of the social injustices that are the foundation of our industrial food system. And at the same time, on a more local level, when you're a restaurant owner and you're having to lay off half of your staff or lay off everyone in the case of some businesses that are shutting down, a lot of restaurant owners are reflecting on the vulnerability of their hourly workers and how you know the exploitation is our food system is rampant with exploitation from the food production through food service, and the impacts of the practices also on people's environments. And so I guess that's the downside, right? Is that this crisis is really revealing all of those inequities and challenges. And I would just say, as kind of a silver lining to that, it's really encouraging to me to see that people are thinking about these issues and trying to put their heads together to find new solutions to them. And you know, examples of this is the perennial problem with kind of local food movements and people that are trying to create you know, farmers markets and access to local food, is that on the one hand, you're trying to create a just food system that acknowledges all of the work of the food producer, but at the same time, how do you do that and also make an accessible product for consumers that don't necessarily have a lot of money to pay extra for food? And there's some really neat models that are starting to take hold right now in terms of solidarity shares. So both, for example, the Tucson CSA, the Pivot Produce, the direct food delivery service, they all are working kind of sliding scale membership fees that are allowing for a certain number of food boxes to be delivered for free or for half price. There's efforts now to increasing kind of linkages between food that goes unused by certain groups to then distribute that food through different relief services, such as Tucson Food Share right now is doing a lot of effort in that. And so those are places where I think there's so much work to do, but there is nice to see that that's happening right now, and that there is a part of how we can take advantage of this moment of, you know, everyone kind of seeing the as the curtain pulls back on the realities of our food system, that we can kind of say, whoa, this is there's a lot that needs to change here. And I just wanted to follow up, Megan, real quick on your second point about like, how do we kind of, what was it? How do we self-care? Or there was some question.
Where do we find relief? Or is relief possible?
Is relief possible? And I'll just speak from a totally personal perspective on that, is that and I know I'm not alone in this, but I absolutely have sought relief in being outdoors right now. And I know that depending on where you are and who you are, that's not always an option, but it's something that's high on my mind in terms of how much we need to be fighting for access to farming land, access to public spaces, and really protecting public space for all of us to enjoy.
Clean air, clean water.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laurel. Doug?
I hope I'm not getting too far off topic, because yes, we're trying our best to support each and every member of the staff here, and I'm trying to give priority in terms of retaining hours worked to people with families, people who have more mouths to feed, but you also can't discredit the people who just have the one mouth to feed as well, and that's it's something that we wrestle with every day. But I wanted to respond to a couple of things, because two things sort of crossed paths. One was a question from Kristen Schmidt about the amount of packaging waste we've gone through doing takeout and delivery. I know the amount of packaging we go through now has changed astronomically. We've gone from being almost entirely a dine-in restaurant to 100% entirely a takeout restaurant. We do reuse some things. We do wine tastings each weekend, and we'll use these little snap top laboratory vials, and people will return them, and we'll clean them, sanitize them, and use them for future wine tastings, which is all well and good. But ultimately, there's a lot of product that's going to waste, and I think it behooves us to kind of consider this as an opportunity to kind of take care of two problems at once. What do we do with this, and how do we employ someone else who's been furloughed or lost work? And is there someone who's already working in this arena who can put these things together and take furloughed hospitality workers or whoever it is and put them to work working on how do we get this stuff recycled once it's already out in the community at 100 different houses or 1,000 different houses or whatever it is. The other packaging issue that I wanted to bring up that maybe people already know about, maybe they don't, is the dramatic shift in where food has been going. And that is, and I wish I had the numbers, maybe Gigi and Laurel have those numbers, but the amount of food that was being consumed that wasn't being prepared in the home before has shifted really dramatically. And so when Bridget was talking about how all of a sudden they couldn't get rice anywhere, well, I can get rice. I don't have a problem getting rice because it's already packaged in 50-pound bags that no one's going to go to the grocery store and buy. The grocery store is not going to carry it. Nobody's going to buy 50 pounds of rice at a time. But I can certainly go to Bridget, and so can, you know, my Cisco rep and my US Food Service rep and my Shamrock Foods rep and my Merit Foods rep, who are all desperate to sell product, but all the restaurants have closed and all the, you know, schools have closed, and they can maybe get that product to someone who can redistribute it a la Eric Stanford. You know, here's Eric, who I used to buy a fair amount of produce from, and now Laurel mentioned Pivot Produce, and he pivoted beautifully. Now I can't even get food from him. I've called him up and said, hey, I saw some carrots on Instagram. Can I get my grubby little paws on them? And he said, no, I can't. They're all spoken for. But I guess I think there are a lot of little points along this spectrum where there's room for someone to come in and start putting people together, like someone like me or my broadliners, with someone like Bridget, who needs to break rice down into little 5-pound bags. And I don't know the answer to who's gonna be that person. I'm kind of a little busy myself right now, and I imagine each of you is too with your own project, but I would wager that there's someone out there who does already work in that sphere, who can incorporate it into what they're doing and maybe make things a little easier on Bridget or on my staff who's working part-time instead of full-time, or somebody else.
Thank you for that.
I can bounce right off of that if that works.
That would be great. Thanks, Bridget.
Yeah. So first of all, yeah, great idea. And that's something that we actually did with our student union. So obviously they package smaller meals, but they make them in large quantities. And so the student union was constantly having like these big bags of rice and stuff that they weren't being used. And I was going to talk about this a little later, but I'll talk about it now. But we actually have a program at the University of Arizona called Boxing Up Hunger. It's a grant-funded program, and the whole point of it was started about all the food left over from catering. How can that get packaged and given to folks who need it? So the program's been going on for about 2 years. So anything that's left over from catering goes into a blast chiller. individually packaged into a small container, put a label on it of what it is, what ingredients in it, and then when it's best by, and give it to us. We immediately then put it in our fridges, and then folks can come and take that as one of their items when they leave. So it eliminates a lot of things. It eliminates the access, concerns of transportation, of money, but also like a huge one is like most folks have access to a microwave, but to be able to prepare a full meal is really hard. Also nutritionally, they're a lot healthier than probably some of the food that we would make in our residence hall rooms. Like I just think back on my college experience. I would much prefer to eat one of these nice prepared meals than probably the ramen that I was eating in my room. So that is one thing. So they were generous enough to donate like 50 pounds or so of these bags that were all already open that they weren't going to use. But that comes back into the packaging material costs. We had to then go through as a team of the pantry, but I can't take credit for it. It was mostly the student union trying to just keep employing their student workers. That was job for student workers, was to package 50-pound bags of rice into little 1-pound containers and put these labels on it. And that happened from everything from beans to pastas and cereals and all these leftovers. And so it's definitely possible, but there just comes into that extra expense of packaging material and the extra expense of labor. And where are you going to get that from? So those two main points. But just to answer Megan's original question briefly, I come from a higher ed background, and higher ed, like scholarly work is what I do. And so I learn a lot about systemic racism. And at the end of the day, food pantries are inherently anti-racist. And what we do is inherently anti-racist. So as we come out with like different ways to support anti-racist efforts, food banks, and especially like the college food banks, are a huge way. So the folks who are using the pantry most likely come from generations of poverty. And we have a huge disparity in people of color. So it's a much, much larger number of people of color than white individuals who come to the pantry. And if you compare that with the University of Arizona numbers, it's pretty astonishing to see that. So what we do already is trying to work on eliminating and like putting a halt in that generational poverty. And that's why students are coming to the U of A in the first place, is to hopefully have that social and economic mobility that they're getting from having a degree. So them coming here and then having something like food standing in their way, that's extremely problematic. That shouldn't happen. Like, we shouldn't have people dropping out because they couldn't eat. So the fact that that's eliminating people's chance to have that social and economic mobility, which is just going to further contribute to them probably being in that cycle of generational poverty, that's a problem. And so investing in the students is essentially investing in your community, especially we have a large number of folks who are right from Tucson. They're just coming to get those degrees. And so in the end, you are investing in like the city of Tucson and the economics of the city of Tucson, but you're doing that through one individual student, which hopefully through generations will then contribute to their students to kind of help eliminate being a first generation student. We see all the research on if you're a first generation student, your chance of retention is a lot lower. So we're just trying to do everything we can to mitigate those basic needs insecurities that are affecting students from not finishing.
Thank you for that. And I just want to acknowledge this panel for being so proactive and answering the Q&A. So we're not going to have a distinct Q&A moment because you've been doing that spontaneously. Rather, I think I'm just going to open up with our last question. And also, I know that we have an attendee who has a resource to share with us all. So the last question really is, what work remains to be done? What actions should we be taking, either collectively or individually, to support our local food system and to support the work that all of you are doing during this time? So hold your thoughts on that. Adam, could we unmute one of our attendees, Grace? I'm hoping you could share with us about briefly about Tucson Food Share, as I know you've been involved with that and you posted a comment about it.
Hello, thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you all for your work. So I will share a little bit about Tucson Food Share, and thank you for the mentions of us, Laurel. I really appreciate it. So we are a mutual aid project that was created on the fly in mid-March, and we do free grocery distribution as well as delivery to people who can't leave their houses. We are a project of Food Not Bombs Tucson, so we continue our group's core mission of cooking and sharing hot vegan and vegetarian food especially with people in De Anza Park and Santa Rita Park. And that work remains crucial because our unhoused neighbors, who are among the most vulnerable during this pandemic, are being displaced from parks. So we recognize that we need to assert the right of people to eat in safety and to take up public space without arrest by Tucson police. As a group, Tucson Food Share operates through horizontal organizing. So there are no paid staff members, there are no officers, no leaders, and all decisions are made by consensus. And we do mutual aid, so neighbors help one another. There are no questions asked of people who pick up. Volunteers take home the groceries that they want, and we rely on donations. And we've been operating out of Tallboys on 4th Avenue, but in preparation for that business taking steps toward reopening, we are going to change locations, and we're preparing to move to Blackledge Community Collective. So please come eat with us, come volunteer with us, or you can follow our move at TucsonFoodShare.org or on our Instagram at foodnotbombs_Tucson. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, Grace. If you wouldn't mind just sharing, you could post those links in the, somebody already did. All right. Thank you. So does anyone on the panel want to start with actions or, yeah, what work remains to be done?
I'll go.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I guess I would be remiss if I didn't first and foremost encourage everyone to vote. There is so much on the ballot right now that affects us local, everywhere from, local to national issues. So vote, vote, vote. There's issues, everything from our school board to the president and Senate, and everything is at play right now. So vote November 3rd, if not early. And the other thing I would just offer is to participate in the things that you believe in whatever ways you're able to. And, I didn't catch if Bridget mentioned what their donations are looking like at the pantry, but I know that the community food bank has actually had record donations during this time, which is great in terms of their ability to offer emergency food aid. But I would encourage people to also think even beyond kind of just thinking about the emergency needs today, but also, as Max mentioned, also thinking about the long game of where we're trying to move towards. And if you can support Flowers and Bullets with their purchase of that land, or organizations like Tucson Food Share, as Grace just mentioned, and just think to the extent that everyone can just add a little bit of their time or a little bit of their financial resources to support what the change that you really want to see, that would be what I would offer.
I can go next. Absolutely. I'll just go off what Laurel said. Donations are huge. We've actually been, since the community food bank is only accepting monetary donations, we've actually been pretty supported in the fact that we've been getting a lot of in-kind donations, which is really helpful for us, because I did mention, like, we did have a lot of issues going to the grocery store. We're a student-run team of 9, and so at the end of the day we don't have a ton of time, and we're all students, and it's hard to go out and look at all the different grocery stores to get stuff. So any donations that way are really important. Also, any monetary donations, connections with grants are really important for us. We have a lot of innovative programs like Boxing Up Hunger. We have 2 rooftop greenhouses, or one on the roof, one at Roger and Campbell. So we're making our own fresh produce that way. We're doing the best we can to connect students to resources, but any more community support that we can get, the better. We've actually gotten some great partnerships by collecting day-old donations from places like Bruegger's and different Starbucks recently. So all of those different connections are extremely beneficial for us, because it's just eliminating that food waste that goes back into climate change and some of those other areas we mentioned. Also connections, like I mentioned before, of like when we were talking with Doug about what do we do when Doug can get big things of food, but I can't get small ones, and how can we repackage? Like, any connections that you have for that's really beneficial for our program. And just really keep an eye out and constantly challenge what is considered the norm. Like I mentioned about foster students, that's not what you'd picture when you think of a college student, but the norm college student is not the person that has a bunch of money and goes out and parties and is privileged. That's not how college is anymore. And so continually looking at where support come from and where folks are living and what they have as means is really important. So I urge you all to do that. Follow us on social media as well. We have a lot of donation drive-ups that we do that have been really successful. And even if you don't have the means to donate, just to share is something to help get us out in the community to bring awareness that college food insecurity does exist. So thank you all for attending today.
Doug, any remaining thoughts for actions?
I would piggyback on what Bridget's saying, and that is the sharing thing, not just in terms of sharing what food you're able to provide or what money you're able to provide, but even, you know, speaking as someone who is, you know, not really financially flush right now, I do have other things that I can contribute. Namely, I've been in this community for a long time. I've developed a lot of connections, and so I can mobilize a lot of people who haven't been as affected by the pandemic, and so it's you can help no matter who you are, whether you can write a big check or whether you can share something on your social media or whether you can tell 10 friends about it. You know, yeah, Will is posting the Instagram stuff for Campus Pantry, and that's the kind of thing where, okay, I can post that on my social media and expose it to that many more people, and so can you. It's incremental, but every little bit helps people who are, you know, between a rock and a hard place right now.
Thank you. Max and Gigi, in our final minute here, do you want to add any actions for us?
I would say, I mean, everyone has said, you know, I would just say continue to build participate in this movement of strengthen our human connection and the connection with all living beings. And feel free to follow us, Frogs and Bullets, on Facebook. You can find us on Facebook and the website. But that's just the virtual connection. So once you build this kind of virtual connection, be in-person connection, you can still make in-person connection safely, even in the COVID. So yeah, I would say take action and, you know, be human. And that's what I mean as like being human means being outside. Being humans means being in a group. And like where I find solace, like yesterday I was really stressed out by my visa stuff. And then, but we have a farm meeting at the farm. So everyone wear a mask and there's still plane noise above, but we're, you know, meeting in person and I'm just processing, taking out the pinto beans. And that's what my grandma's been doing, my grandma's been doing, processing food as a group. So work on something as a group. I think that will make the change.
I don't know if I have too much more to add. These are all great things. I think just to build off of all of these is just thinking about, you know, like what works now and how do we build those things into the system so that when crisis hits, we already have, you know, these networks established and these channels established to move food from one place to another and store it. And so I think that, you know, just keeping track of like, these were the things that were really effective during 2020. And, you know, how can we get some more financial support and policy support to build those things up and out so that we can adapt even more quickly next time.
Well, thank you so much to all the panelists for giving your time today. Many of you I know are balancing very demanding schedules, and many of us are caregiving while working from home. And yeah, this has been your words have been very inspirational, I think. And Willa, do you want to add any final remarks?
No, I think everyone has summed it up really well, but we are really happy that all of you joined us tonight virtually. And I encourage you, as we've mentioned, there's a ton of links in the chat, but follow up with all these organizations and the like million others in our region that make our food system so unique, I would say.
Well, thank you to Tucson Meet Yourself and the Museum of Art and our, please also check us out, the Center for Regional Food Studies. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.